So this is the scroll saw, and there are a lot of different parts of the scroll saw, but when you're using the scroll saw, there are only a few pieces and parts that you touch and you deal with. So I'm going to give an up-close shot to just talk about the different parts and pieces of the scroll saw and how you use them and what you shouldn't and should touch. So this is the table of our scroll saw. This is where we put our wood and move our wood along. You want to make sure that there aren't any nails or screws sticking out of your wood or any pieces of metal sticking out of your wood, because then you can put scratches in the table, and that's what these are. And we want to keep this surface as flat as we can and with the least amount of scratches that we can. The next part I want to talk about is this piece right here. So we're going to look at it from the side as well. This piece holds down our piece of wood and make sure that it's not bouncing up and down a ton. So basically, this piece would go underneath of here, and we can see that there's a really small gap. So when this starts going up and down, this holds it down. So it's called a hold down, and that just helps keep our piece stabilized so that it's not only our hands holding the piece of wood down. And this is adjustable up and down by loosening this bit right here, and then this moves up and down and can also be taken out. The next little piece of our scroll saw is the blade. So this is our blade. I have a pretty chunky blade in there right now. These tend to break all the time, and that's okay. If you break a blade, just raise your hand, let me know so that I can fix it. Do not try to fix a blade on your own. To fix it though, you would loosen this, loosen that, and then adjust the tension on it. Beside the blade, you can see this thing. I think it kind of looks like a dragon tail or something, but it does have a purpose, so you don't want to just keep it off of there. So it does pop off, tends to pop off, and sometimes people just put this by the side and not put it back on, but there is a purpose to this. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that back on. It's really easy to get back on there. And the purpose is it blows air through this tube and onto your working piece. So you want to angle this right towards where the blade is cutting, and it blows air and keeps sawdust off of your pencil line so you can continue to see what you're cutting. Now this is where it gets to the confusing part as far as what to touch and what not to touch. So this is the blade tensioner. So this is used when you're changing the blade. As a student, you should never be touching this, because then you might be breaking the blade and making the blade loose, which can be unsafe. So you never want to adjust the tension of this, so don't ever touch this knob. However, this red button, this is the on and off switch. You can touch this. So obviously, to turn the machine on, you would need to hit the on button or push it in the on direction, and that turns the machine on, and then just push it back down to turn the machine off. Behind the on and off switch is a speed dial. So if you look at it, there are different speeds, and it just rotates and spins to go to different speeds. So this would be a slow speed, so it goes really slow. So if I were to speed this up, then my blade starts going a lot faster. So that is something that you will not really adjust. So typically this will be set for the pieces that we're cutting, because we're all cutting the same thickness of piece. But generally speaking, when you're cutting a thicker piece, you want to be on a higher speed, and then when you're cutting a thinner piece, you want to be on a lower speed. And to tell what speed it is, it's where this knob lines up with whatever is on this dial. So basically, a good rule of thumb, the only thing to touch on here is red on and off switch. Anything else can really be left alone except for this hose. You might need to readjust that every once in a while. So the scroll saw is used for a variety of different cuts. We can do straight cuts, curved cuts, really detailed, intricate cuts as well. There is a limit to how far you can turn your piece of wood in the blade without breaking it. So this is pretty much a 90-degree angle right here, and our blade cannot make a nice sharp 90-degree angle turn. So there's a specific way that you would have to cut this piece, and that would be going in this direction, back the blade out, and then come at it from this direction, go up into that corner, and then this piece will just fall out. So that is how you would have to cut a nice 90-degree angle or any sharp turns like that. This one, you can just cut and follow that line. So you can just follow the line with your blade, and you shouldn't have an issue because those turns are nice and wide. These turns are probably too sharp to cut. You may not break the blade while trying to cut this, but you probably aren't going to be able to get the machine to turn fast enough in order to get nice looking cuts. So I might approach this similar as that to I approaching this. So I would maybe go up, cut one direction, back out, and then go in the other direction and then back out, and that piece would fall out. So multiple different ways you can cut on a scroll saw, but you do need to be cognizant of the sharp turns and make sure you're not turning too sharp. Okay, so I do want to give a kind of an overtop bird's eye view of how I would approach cutting this middle line. First, I would want to line up my blade with my line. So if I want to cut down this direction, I don't want to line my blade up like this because then I'm going to cut straight. So if my blade is lined up like this, then I would be cutting something like that because I'm just going straight in. So we want to make sure that we angle the blade in line with our pencil marks that we're trying to cut. And then once I enter that wood, I'm just going to follow my line, and then I can also move this up and down to move that sawdust off of my line. And then I'm just going to follow that line and slowly turn my wood as I move through the blade. So I'm making sure to hold this down with my fingers, making sure I'm applying good pressure up from up top, as well as moving it forward. If I do not apply pressure from up top, then my board can start moving up and down and get really loose and move around like that. So I'm going to cut the rest of this line, and you can watch from that direction. And you always want to make sure that you do have your safety glasses on while you're doing this. So then that would be my piece cut apart. I do want to show just how I would cut this. So I'd come up, back out, and then go in this direction. So I do just want to show you an example of how to do that so you can have the visual. So I backed my blade out while it was on, so make sure that the blade is still, or the machine is still on while you're backing out. So I did one cut, and then now I'll meet it the other direction, and then this piece should just fall out. So then that piece falls out, and I have a nice sharp corner. The last thing that I do want to talk about is one of the probably most dangerous things with this machine is what we call the blade exit. So other than just sticking your finger directly into the blade, you really won't have much injury with this machine. It might bounce up and down a little bit, but vibrate your hands a little bit, but all that takes is just holding this piece down a little bit more. Unless you are unaware of where your hand is and putting it in the blade, you really shouldn't cut your fingers on the blade unless you misdo a blade exit. So the blade exit is when we get to the end of the wood and you're about to exit your wood. And what can happen is you're putting so much force to get that board through. So best visualization I have is putting your fists together. And so you're putting force against your fists, and then once you're done cutting, this is me pushing into the blade. Once you're done cutting, that one slips and it goes forward, and then your fingers can slip into that blade. So when you get to the blade or get to the blade exit towards the end, you just want to make sure you're slowing down and you're aware of your hands and make sure that they're out of the way. So it'll look like this. So I can see that I'm close to the end. So I want to start slowing down. And then I'm also going to make sure that all my hands and fingers are out of the way. And I'm going to go nice and slow. And as you can see, nothing jolted forward. My hands were out of the way and I was safe. So I'm going to show you a bad example of a blade exit. So this would be what not to do and what it would look like if you were doing this wrong. So that's also a good example of my blade breaking because I was pushing too hard. So sometimes if you're pushing too hard, you're putting way too much pressure on that blade and you'll just snap that blade right in half. And if I would have gotten to the end of there, it would have just popped right through and my hands would have been shoved forward. So I'm going to go ahead and try to finish that line and show you an example of a bad blade exit. So as you can see, I kind of jolted forward, whereas with the first one, I exited and I stayed about right there. As far as safety gear goes, really what you need is safety glasses and to make sure that any dangly things on your wrists are out of the way. Other than that, most of the safety with this machine just comes with not putting your fingers in the blade and being aware of the blade exit.